Welcome, guys, to How the Frack We Got Here, a show that takes the news and events of the week and try to make sense out of it all. I'm your host, the most Will Buchanan, and on this show, we simply are all about the facts. There are plenty of news stations out there that simply want to do anything short but inform you. Here at How the Frack We Got Here, that's all we believe in. We go up to the left, we go up to the right, we go up to the middle of independence, we go after all sides because there's more than one side of a story to everything. And you need to know it all in order to actually formulate your own opinion. And that's what we try to do here at How the Frack We Got Here. Thanks for listening, and hold on. It's going to be fun.
All right, guys. Today's date, August 31st, 2022, and this is How the Frack We Got Here. I'm host and most Will Buchanan on the Frack We Got Here. We do take the events of the week and try to make sense of it all. Before we get started, guys, sometimes the language may be a little bit strong, so apologize in advance. At the same time, there may be things that might be too intense to be shown to younger viewers, so viewer discretion is advised. Aside from that, welcome. So, as we are about to entrench on this Labor Day-esque weekend, we go back to Mar-a-Lago because apparently where there's smoke, there's fire.
Team Trump want this information out there? Why would they even ask for a special master knowing what the evidence is?
It's insane. They asked for the Justice Department to punch them in the face, and that's what the Justice Department did in this brief. As Elliot points out, they talk about obstruction. These documents were moved around from room to room, and then they actually show us the certification. I don't think we've seen that before. The certification from Trump's lawyers that said, "Hey, there were no more documents, no more classified documents left here," in response to a subpoena. They gave a red well of documents back, and it turned out. And they certified that's it. There's all the responsive documents we have. And it turned out that there were no documents anywhere other than in that storage room. Turned out there were documents in his office. There were documents all over the place, and tons of them. Mm-hmm. I mean, they have, this factual recitation has him dead to rights. There's just no question about it. And it explains a lot today about what we were seeing Donald Trump truthing out on his social media platform that's failing. He was basically just freaking out all day. And the reason is this evidence.
And that got away from me. I apologize. So what happened? Well, it seems that there were a few documents that were hidden at Mar-a-Lago in a certain area. And I keep saying this all the time, guys. I find myself saying this. Everybody on the conservative side, this is a raid. They want to get Trump so bad. They want to get Trump on this. They want to get Trump on that. And at the same time, the more the Department of Justice looks into this, the more that Trump, our failure in chief, looks guilty. And I'm going to be honest, the more I look at this, the more I sit there and say it. What is it going to take to put this man in jail? Let's be honest. I haven't seen this much scrutiny at documentation at a presidential figure since Richard Nixon. Watergate. For all those, including myself, Watergate happened before my time, but I'm a student of history. The Watergate scandal had less documentation than this. And even more so, Nixon knew when it was time to get out because he himself was about to be impeached and removed as the president. Trump literally took home documents he was not supposed to have because once you no longer are president, you no longer have certain clearances. And he took documents pertaining to CIA, to FBI, and other agencies. Things that a private citizen cannot have. Even more so before the raid even happened, keep in mind, they asked him before to return the documents. It's like, hey, you took some documents, return them. He didn't return them. He said that he declassified them, which is why I kept saying this whole entire time, you think somebody on Trump's legal team would hand Trump a constitution, or at least a copy of it for him to look for his own records. You as a president For all those that are wondering, a president cannot declassify information by just sitting there saying, I declassify it. No, it goes through a process. It gets redacted. That's why, just like the Mueller report that was put out by then William Barr, that was a heavily redacted report, heavily, before it was released. The point I'm making out of all this is, again, what is it going to take for Trump to finally see the inside of a jail cell? I mean, he's already facing multiple lawsuits. He's already facing the real estate issue in New York. He's facing the documents he wasn't supposed to have at Mar-a-Lago. He's facing multiple lawsuits and implications. Even his COO at the time just went down for money laundering, which goes to show you that out of Sleepy Carl and Mike Pence, I think those are the only two people in his administration that weren't fired or indicted or put in jail yet. The point I'm making, guys, is just that it's going to come to a certain standard. It's going to come to a hilt. I think there's going to be a single straw that breaks the camel's back, because Trump by now, if he was anyone else, would be under the jail. But for some odd reason, he is still allowed to grift people. He is still allowed to go on True Social, which is also bankrupt, by the way, that he's also a major shareholder of. Amazing. Every one of Trump's enterprises seem to be going broke, but yet he's a successful businessman. Right. But we will follow the story as it goes along, because as the DOJ keeps getting more and more involved in this, the more it just looks like Trump will not get out of this, which doesn't bear well considering that in the next story where we talk about conservatives doing a 180 on a lot of things, because as I said, we are literally 1 day away from entering September. Midterms is really about to get real. But imagine again, we look at towns that are woefully needing infrastructure, so to the point to where we have water crises. It's 2022, and we still have water crisis in America because a lot of places, its infrastructure is older than most bridges. But again, I'm not talking about Flint, Michigan. No, I'm talking about Jackson, Mississippi.
Morning in Jackson, Mississippi, residents are already lining up for limited supplies of water. The governor declaring a new state of emergency, calling in the National Guard to help distribute water to 180,000 people.
This is not a situation that's going to be solved immediately, and it's not going to be solved overnight.
If you're lucky enough to get water from the tap, it has to be boiled. Taprice Young says her kids' schools have no water, forcing the district to implement virtual learning this week. It also means showering at a relative's house and spending $100 a week for bottled water.
We've had to boil water to cook, to wash dishes, pretty much to brush our teeth. So it's been hectic.
Football Hall of Famer Deion Sanders, now coaching at Jackson State University, says his players and the other students here need to be supported.
This is the city of Jackson. We don't have water. So right now, we're operating in crisis mode.
And for many more residents, the wait for water could be long.
What's your message to the people that had to leave empty-handed today?
We do have water in the system. We are putting it in the city's distribution system, and over the next 24 to 36 hours, we will see significant numbers of the truckloads of clean water.
As officials do what they can, friends and family are relying on each other. Stephanie Griedler spent $90 on this one grocery run to make sure her elderly parents had water.
It is a complete shame that this is not a new thing. Water challenges have been there for years.
Now, President Biden has accepted the emergency declaration here, which means now FEMA and the Department of Homeland Security will be able to coordinate and bring in extra resources to work with the city and the state and make those necessary repairs here at the main water plant in Jackson. Chanel?
Absolutely.
So that's just the half of it. Remember when they sat there and said, infrastructure has been a problem for a long time. And I mean, for a long time, when interviewed, a teacher was able to point this out.
off isn't just for the kids, it's also for the water. The entire city is facing a boil water notice again.
We're told don't wash your hair with the water, don't brush your teeth with the water.
Lakeisha Galilan worries about her 8-year-old.
Is she going to walk over to a water fountain and drink from that water fountain?
To be safe, signs are up at the middle school. They've been there a long time.
You can't remember a time when the kids could use the water fountains in the school?
I can't remember. I honestly can't remember.
George Stewart has taught here for 6 years, a predominantly Black, low-income school. On top of all the other challenges, water quality and water pressure are a constant battle.
At one point, we had to shut down for about 2 weeks.
When?
This was maybe a year or two ago.
In the middle of the pandemic?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Class went virtual. Kids fell further behind.
We have many students who consider some of our most vulnerable students who virtual learning does not help them at all.
The problem here, like so many other places, is failing infrastructure.
This is one of 2 water treatment facilities in Jackson, and the one largely to blame for the most recent citywide boil water notice. And officials still can't tell people when the water will be safe to drink again.
In 2020, an EPA report cited a long list of problems with the water system, including failure to replace lead pipes, faulty monitoring equipment, inadequate staffing.
There's been a failure to recognize this as a unified problem, as a problem both on the state and even at times the federal level, understanding that we lived in an aging America.
Shokwe Antar Lumumba is Jackson's mayor.
If I could write you a check right now to fix the problem, how big would that check have to be?
For the water system alone, it would have to be in excess of more than $200 million.
Pastor CJ Rhodes, father of twins, has watched many in Jackson lose faith in their leaders.
I don't think our congregation is the only one that feels that way. You talk to people all across the city. Many are livid. Many want to vote people out.
Not far from the surface, concerns that racial inequities could be to blame.
I am concerned about my city filled with residents that look like me. I think this is an opportunity to change the narrative of what Mississippi is known for.
And that can start, he says, by providing the most basic of needs, water. Stephanie Gosk, NBC.
Crazy how other things are added into this. Now, of course, we can start with Flint, Michigan. We can start with Jackson, Mississippi. The one thing that has always been the difference and the big difference as far as Mississippi being a conservative state, that the fact that they were told literally over 2 years ago that their water systems need to be updated, pipes need to be removed, monitoring systems need to be updated. But here's the problem at the time. At the time, for the simple fact of the matter, is just that the EPA didn't have the same authority that they do now. For example, just to give you guys some context, the EPA's power was stripped by Trump. And I mean stripped to the point to where they couldn't do anything. And I do mean anything. Oh, they could put notices out there. True. Notices can be put out there. No problem. But aside from that, they couldn't do anything else. And that alone is a problem. So again, guys, the thing I keep pointing out the most is just that if you really do look at these situations, that you had Republican governors ignore infrastructure until it broke. In Flint, Michigan, again, they switched the water systems to Lake Michigan, but did not fix the pipes. Did not actually fix the system there, and that caused a problem. But the problem's been underlying for years. Jackson, Mississippi is the same way. The only reason it became a problem is because it went from affecting a few to affecting the entire city. To the point where it's considered where emergency actions will need to be taken, to where FEMA and Homeland Security will need to step in. Yes, I think politicians need to be held accountable, starting with the governor. The Governor Andrew Tate and everyone else was so concerned about banning abortions that they forgot to fix the water problem that's been lagging them for years. But it wasn't affecting them, it was affecting minorities. Now that it affects everyone, now it's a problem. And that's usually been the conservative tone with a lot of things. If it affects too little, it's not a problem. If it affects a lot of people, then it's a problem. That's the way they've always been, especially in Mississippi, where, again, you just heard a teacher sit there and say, I can't think the last time that we actually had clean drinking water in our schools. But we'll follow those stories as they go along. Another story I found interesting is that I know we talked about this on the podcast about a week and a half ago, where "In God We Trust" were being filtered around, especially in Texas, to be put out there, just be put in a non-conspicuous place, which is very way of saying just put it somewhere where it's not going to bother anybody. Well, aside from that "In God We Trust" signs, there were other signs that were offered but refused. I wonder why.
Why is more God not good? And are you saying you don't have like 1 square feet of space in our buildings?
Shravan Krishna tried to donate "In God We Trust" signs created by current and former students to the school board that were in the colors of the LGBT and transgender flags, as well as one in Arabic. 2 weeks ago, the district accepted "In God We Trust" signs from a self-proclaimed Christian conservative cell phone provider that donated $500,000 to influence school board elections in the county. The district is required to accept them under a new state law, but they declined this donation, saying they don't have to accept more than one copy. That isn't in the state law, but the board president said it's their reading of it.
And all of us are stakeholders in this community. It's very frustrating that we are being excluded intentionally by our schools. And that's why it's very frustrating for us.
Another focus tonight was books. Last week, Carroll ISD was reviewing whether a book written by George Dawson, the grandson of a former slave, could be taught in the district school that's named after him. There were concerns over a chapter that discusses a lynching, but Dawson's great-grandson said he's read the book to students every year and called it hurtful last week. Tonight, he spoke directly to the board.
So how can we move forward to realize, to see how it is taught and taught properly, so we can actually get together and sit down and see how it can be taught correctly, and it's not sit there and sugarcoat it.
Now, I love the fact that, well, number one, that, again, this is the same group of people out there. And honestly, before I even get started going down this path, this is indoctrination 101. Don't believe me? In God We Trust. Something that wasn't a part of money, wasn't a part of the Pledge of Allegiance till the late 70s, wasn't a part of money till the late 70s. But yet somehow we were founded under a Christian nation, which was also untrue. Again, indoctrination. Even more so that you will not accept "In God We Trust" signs in the same city, in the same state that accepted those from donors. You will not accept "In God We Trust" with LGBTQ plus colors or Arabic language "In God We Trust" signs. It's almost like your bigotry is showing, because again, there was nothing in their rule book that said they could accept more than one "In God We Trust" sign, but it's how they read it. Again, education at its finest, where there's nothing that prevents them from accepting it, but they have to say something other than saying, no, we're pretty much bigots, and if you're not Christian, and if you're not our, Bible-toting, gun-loving, Republican, blue-eyed, white Jesus, you're not one of us. That's how they feel about it. Even more so where it goes back to books. We don't want our children to learn about slavery. Oh, you don't want them to know that your ancestors possibly owned slaves, and because of that, you don't want them feeling a certain way. This is why I say it's indoctrination 101, and why do we stay away from America's dark history? If you're going to tell history, tell the good and the bad. America has had a lot of dark moments, and even more so, yes, was there a group of people that was more responsible for those dark points in America's history than any other race? Arguably, yes. Should it be said? Should it be told? Yes. Because that's where you get cultural sensitivity. That's where you get cultural awareness. That's where a child realizes, oh, because of this happening in the past, I don't want to be a part of that. That's not indoctrination. That's actually producing critical thinking people. But again, conservative-led organizations, conservative-led education will always lead to narrow-minded, bigoted individuals. Tell me if I'm wrong. But speaking of narrow-minded, bigoted individuals, a lot of Republicans are really changing their mind on abortion. Not to the point to where they're going to sit there and agree with women that women should have full autonomy of their own bodies with nobody else's judgment or choices pushed upon them, but to soften the blow enough because they realize, okay, yes, we succeeded in getting Roe versus Wade overturned, but at the same time, there are a bunch of future women voters who are necessarily pissed that their rights to their own bodies have been taken away, and this could affect me in the next coming weeks in September. At least that's the way of one Republican's way of thinking, which again I find it hilarious. But you be the judge.
People support common sense regulation around abortion.
Republican U.S. Senate nominee Blake Masters, surrounded by his children, trying to reset the debate over abortion rights.
I support a ban on very late-term and partial birth abortion, and most Americans agree with that.
Just after this digital video dropped, Masters' campaign site scrubbed strict anti-abortion language. Before, Masters wrote he's 100% pro-life, calling Roe v. Wade a horrible decision, then listed a series of strict stances on abortion. Now, a softer tone. Roe went from horrible to a bad decision. The words 100% pro-life removed from this section, and that list of positions is shorter.
There's no getting around it that abortion in his particular race is a hot, hot issue for one of those swing coalitions. He has to speak to that issue, and being pro-life 100% of the time isn't going to get him there. So he has to attempt to make that pivot.
Masters' campaign says he remains 100% pro-life, but he's not the only one retooling.
I'm Tom Barrett.
In Michigan's 7th Congressional District, challenger Tom Barrett fundraised in the Republican primary as 100% pro-life, no exceptions. But over the weekend, his website that listed a value section to protect life from conception is now gone. Barrett's campaign tells CNN, we regularly update the website.
Should all abortions be illegal in this country?
In Iowa's Republican primary to represent the 3rd Congressional District,
For all abortions, no exceptions.
the man in the center, Zach Nunn, won the Republican nomination. The incumbent, Democratic Congresswoman Cindy Axne, turned that primary debate moment into a campaign ad.
Even in the case of rape, even in the case of incest, even if a woman's life is in danger.
Nunn's campaign did not respond directly to CNN's request for comment on the Democratic attacks, but Nunn wrote in an editorial that the ad was false and says while he opposes abortion, we must be compassionate toward both women and unborn children.
I've grown up here.
In Minnesota's gubernatorial race, Republican nominee Scott Jensen, a doctor, said this in a radio interview before the primary.
If a mother's life is in danger, I think that would have to be a medical consideration and an area for potential exception.
No exceptions for rape or incest?
Unless the mother's life is in danger.
Now, in the general election, he's calling his previous words clumsy.
If I've been unclear previously, I want to be clear now. Rape and incest, along with endangering the mother's mental or physical health, are acceptable exceptions.
It is an animating issue, particularly in very tight congressional and Senate races where there are lots of college-educated white women, but that's not every district in America. So in select races, you're seeing these shifts on abortion. The challenge is on some of these very hot issues, the other campaign keeps receipts, meaning they have the website. They have the primary TV ads.
Too dangerous for Arizona. Those receipts are now appearing in general election ads. Democratic campaigns and groups have spent more than $50 million in ads referencing abortion since Roe was overturned, sensing a chance to energize voters this November.
Again. How many more times? We're a month away. Well, technically we haven't reached September yet, but by the time tomorrow happens, it'll be September the 1st. We're not that far off. And actually, we're 2 months away because it's November. So, but it's funny. It is truly, truly, truly comical. It is literally the politician two-step, even more so. That we
demanding answers this morning, saying she was the target.
Quiet you. It is literally the politician two-step. You just saw three Republicans whose initial stance, I'm 100% pro-life. Abortion should be banned. regardless of his rape or incest, regardless of the mother's life is in danger, we must protect the unborn child. And as we get closer, to the midterm elections, Roe versus Wade, it was a bad decision. This is why I sit there and tell Republicans were loving this, because once Roe versus Wade got overturned, every Republican came out and hoped that their constituents, they had enough constituents, whether they were Trump people or not, because some people aren't Trump, some people are not Trump cult people and still are against abortion, but a lot of those politicians were expecting those people to curry their favor and say, yes, I am pro-life. I am defending our unborn children. I am trying to, protect the ones that don't have a voice. They rode that wave until they realized, oh crap, there are a whole lot of women voters out there. And you could say college-educated white women, but you also forget there are twice as many minority women out there who feel just as pissed off. And these are the ones that the conservatives are not paying attention to, but all of a sudden, now they're paying attention to them. Because I said it a couple months ago on this podcast, once those November midterm elections come, I called it already. And I sat there and said this was going to happen, and watch, I'm right. The whole chickens is coming to roost. Republicans were praising Roe versus Wade got overturned. They're going to be eating crow by the time November comes around, because just like the journalist said, there are receipts. Everybody has kept receipts. We're in a world where anything that's online 9 times out of 10 has been screenshot, has been saved, and is hoping said person has turned around and has sat there and said, this is how you feel? Let me go back to this. That's the big one. Because if you haven't noticed, that's all in the PPP loans. Marjorie Taylor Greene, Ben Shapiro, a lot of them got caught talking about, if you take out a loan, you should pay for it. And in Twitter fashion, this you? And they showed. And you can also go on ProPublica.com and you can see everybody got PPP loans and which ones they got forgiven. But going back to these Republicans who are changing their stances on abortion, because again, they realize the fallout from those women voters, from all those potential women voters, they're feeling the fallout from, because in my opinion, you spurned every woman that feels like her body choices are not her own, that a room of old white men decided that they still need to have control over a woman's body. And now, come November, it's going to be a different story, because trust and believe, every opponent of a conservative who is for abortion will remind everyone that every Republican is in favor of Roe versus Wade, including the ones that are running in November. All I can say to the Republicans is, good luck with that PR spin. All of you are going to need it. Switching gears for a second before the story actually played, a Duke volleyball player has come forward because she was the target of racial slurs. Yes, an NCAA player in 2022 at a spot where you don't normally think it would happen. But again, this goes back to my whole thing of indoctrinated religious schools, always doing some things that are, questionable.
The Duke University volleyball player demanding answers this morning, saying she was the target of racist taunts during a match in Utah. This morning, she is telling her story, and Janae Norman is here with more on this. Good morning, Janae.
Guys, good morning. So listen, classes started yesterday at Duke. So when I spoke with Rachel Richardson last night, she said she'd shoved the experience in the back of her mind and was focused on school and volleyball. She is a student athlete, but realizes that when people see her, she's a Black woman first. And she's hoping the racism she endured on the court can be a teaching moment for folks off the court.
Richardson again fires that one.
New fallout this morning from the volleyball court.
Well, at first it was kind of like did I hear that right? Like, I didn't really believe it.
Duke sophomore Rachel Richardson says she and her Black teammates were targeted with racial slurs and threats during their game against rival BYU over the weekend.
The next time I went back to serve, I was like, okay, yep, I definitely heard that right. I immediately just told one of my most trusted teammates, and I was like, I just heard someone use a racial slur, to address me, essentially.
Richardson taking to Twitter saying the heckling lasted for the entire match, and when it turned to threats, they began to feel unsafe. She says both the officials and BYU coaching staff were made aware of the incident during the game, but failed to take the necessary steps to stop the unacceptable behavior and create a safe environment.
My coaches and my teammates, they responded immediately to the best of their ability, because in that moment, I was like, they're doing something on my behalf.
BYU confirming that the fan accused of launching those attacks is not a student and that they are now permanently banned by BYU.
Even if, as they say, it wasn't a student who was doing this, there were students nearby. And so the fact that they didn't know what to do in the moment to call him out or to let him know that's not accepted here, you need to stop. That's not wanted here. It's a level of ignorance. And so if there's a lack of knowledge on racism and how to deal with it, that's how you have things like this continue to happen.
The next night, the BYU athletic director with strong words for their supporters.
Cheer them on as loud as you can, but do not cross the line where you would hurt or harm anyone in any way.
Richardson has thanked him for his support and says he's been at the forefront of making sure his athletes get the proper education and training to handle any similar encounter effectively. Richardson's father says although she's receiving overwhelming support, there's need for more action and accountability.
So if you're standing in that crowd and someone is doing that next to you, what is progress? Progress is someone saying, hey, stop that.
For Rachel, she calls the incident an opportunity for herself and for others.
I'm not the first person. I'm not the last person. This isn't an isolated incident. It's an opportunity for not just me, but for anyone who has an opinion, anyone who has a voice, to decide that it should be the last time.
So some said that the Duke volleyball team should have protested and stopped playing the match. Rachel says that never even crossed her mind. They were there to play volleyball. That's what they did. And she added that she doesn't believe this one person or even those in the crowd nearby are reflective of BYU's values. So,
yeah, I can say that, but I kind of agree to a certain extent. It's like, if you heard a slur like that, do you think it's 2022? Yes. And there are still people, not just BYU. It can happen anywhere. And yeah, that person was found out and was banned. Okay, cool. But again, the actual environment that spurned that is still there. Now, I can agree with her to say, yeah, the moment that should have been heard, they should just went ahead and protest the game. Because let's be honest, the only thing that changes a lot of things in society is money. And unless money is affected, nothing is really going to happen. I do commend her for speaking out. I do commend Duke and even BYU's athletic director coming out and saying, look, cheer them on, but don't cross the line. But yes, you may have tried to resolve the problem, but the cause of said problem is still there. We still have a lot of people that, again, without that cultural sensitivity training, without that actual education of learning the history of America's dark parts, especially when it comes to racism, especially when it comes to slavery, especially when it comes to violent actions that have literally been born from, you guessed it, saying racial slurs to minorities. That problem is still there. And even more so, until we address it, I fear that will not be the last time another NCAA player who is Black will encounter that. But again, I understand what everybody's trying to do, but the actual cause of the problem still remains. Switching gears for a second, guys, Biden again, who is still doing his victory lap, not only from his Inflation Reduction Act plan, not only for the praise he was given for his student loan debt forgiveness, even though it's a drop in the bucket, even though it could have gone farther, it's still so far it's something. It's a start if I knew more was going to come down the line, but I'm just going to say that his plan was something. Because again, even though we are getting very close, we're still a few months off from the November mid-election primaries. That being said, he is taking his victory lap on a lot of things, and even moving forward when introducing a new plan. And as you can guess, A lot of people that still call him Crime Bill Joe right now are pretty much saying, I told you so.
Yet another bullet-riddled car. A father shot dead at a gas station. A 14 and 10-year-old survived. Little more than 100 miles away, President Biden defended his record on crime ahead of this year's midterms.
When it comes to public safety in this nation, the answer is not defund the police, it's fund the police.
His administration's plan to curb gun violence includes $13 billion over the next 5 years to hire more police officers, $3 billion to help courts clear backlogs, and a 13% increase in the ATF's budget for new investigators to help cities trace firearms and analyze ballistics. The president also hoping to build on federal gun safety legislation Congress passed earlier this summer.
I'm determined to ban assault weapons in this country.
He's also calling out the GOP lawmakers who've suggested defunding the FBI following the search of former President Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate.
There's no place in this country, no place, for endangering the lives of law enforcement.
Republicans are blaming Democrats and lenient prosecutors for the crime surge.
We need to be more concerned with helping the victims of crime than in placating the perpetrators of crime.
During the pandemic, firearm-related injuries nationwide rose 34%, deaths 28%. In New York City, shootings also spiked during COVID, but are still much less frequent than in the 1970s.
How does crime now in New York City compare to what it was back then? It's not comparable.
That's when Curtis Sliwa first organized a volunteer group called the Guardian Angels to patrol subways and neighborhoods.
You're beginning to see that we're receding back to a point where there was lawlessness and anarchy.
And the gun debate is heating up once again here in New York. A ban on guns in so-called sensitive areas like Times Square takes effect this week.
Okay. So, yeah, that did not go the way I intended. So there was a gun bill. There was a plan. There was a plan to basically curb gun violence. I actually give you a second. I'm pretty sure I could find it. Because it did say it a little bit. Okay, so it is a bill that he discussed. That it's basically $13 billion over the next 5 years to hire more police officers. $3 billion to help courts clear $3 billion to help courts clear backlogs. Courts clear backlogs. Try saying that 5 times fast. Also, it also leads to a 13% budget increase for the ATF. Now, I know what a lot of y'all are thinking. $13 billion over the next 5 years to hire more police officers. $3 billion to clear court backlogs. The ATF's budget will get a 13% increase. There are a lot of people right now who call him Crime Bill Joe and going, he's already done it once. Now, again, I keep saying this the entire time. The whole point of curbing violence, gun violence, is not to basically increase law enforcement, especially when law enforcement needs to have an overhaul on itself. Especially the fact that, again, you trade longer to be a stylist or a plumber, electrician, or a contractor than you do a law enforcement in this country. At the same time, the next 2 stories will immediately show why law enforcement definitely does need to be looked at and overhauled. Even more so that, again, $3 billion for the court clear a court backlog, which means you want to process cases. You know how else you can process cases? Decriminalize marijuana, and basically anybody that has low to mid-level marijuana charges should be released from jail and have their records expunged. That's how you can reduce crime. You know how else you can reduce crime? By investing in communities that have low income or lack of financial or other opportunities to basically curb crime themselves. Because again, when you have a location that does not have a lot of financial educational opportunities, that does not have a lot of vocational or after-school programs for kids, that does not have a working library or a pool or recreation areas for children, when you have nothing but poverty, low income wages, and overcrowding, what do you think is going to happen? Crime. But you don't combat crime by adding more officers, which is, again, this is the plan that Biden is wanting to move first on. I could see a lot of moderate and centrist Democrats running on this. Republicans, because you would think this would be up their alley because, you know, they were all about backing the blue. But as you can tell, they're not doing much backing the blue these days, especially when it comes to that. So they're a toss-up. So again, for all those that are saying, oh, Joe is just going to be old Crime Bill Joe, it's hard to argue and not say that you're right because you've been validated. But speaking of the officers I talked about, guys, especially Uvalde, again, we did talk about the police chief being fired as of last week. And then I also said, what is going to happen to the officers that were under his watch that were waiting 70 plus minutes to breach the door to stop one lone gunman? I wonder, were they able to keep their jobs? I hate that I'm right.
Outrage in Uvalde, Texas, 3 months after the school massacre that left 19 children and 2 teachers dead. With the new school year about to begin, parents were left with unanswered questions at a school board meeting last night. Officials acknowledge they still haven't started the process of evaluating the police officers who responded to the massacre, so those officers will remain on the job, and many of the new security measures are still not in place. Additional police officers have not been hired as promised, and the board doesn't know who will monitor hundreds of new security cameras.
It is time now for a look.
Messed up, isn't it? The same officers who were under that guy's watch, these same officers who was outside the doors for 70 plus minutes, the same officers who were good guys with guns, who did not breach after one gunman, will be allowed to keep their jobs, will be allowed to go into those same schools. The same, and this is a failure on the Uvalde districts. This is a failure on the Uvalde school district. This is a failure on everybody from the mayor down. Because you fired the police chief to satisfy some parents, but you didn't get them all. You didn't get the officers who should have went in. They all sat there, hand sanitizer, checking themselves and all, but didn't go in to save kids. And now those parents now have to deal with the fact that those very same officers will still be allowed to protect and serve. All because the school district doesn't have answers, and they've had plenty of time. In my opinion, if I was the parents, everybody on that school district board needs to be removed. If you cannot get us competent officers, if you cannot have a competent plan in place, you really shouldn't be there. And I can understand parents' anger, especially hearing that news, that officers who did nothing were allowed to keep their jobs. Meanwhile, this other story I got, this officer only did one thing and he was fired on the spot. Let me know if you can notice the difference.
Trying to repair broken relationships. And brother, we need you.
This is Louisville Metro Corrections Officer Turon Knight at the police department set up at the Kentucky State Fair. He's making a phony recruiting video for LMPD, pretending that he works for them instead of for the jail. The video quickly goes south.
We need backup. Answer the call. Be a part of a great police department. Never mind what happened to Breonna Taylor. We killed that bitch.
Knight doesn't stop there.
Do you want to drive vehicles like this and fly in planes? Do you want to be able to have unlimited off duty? Do you want to be able to support your family? Do you want to kill people and be able to get off for it? Join Louisville Metro Police Department.
The jail's director, Jerry Collins, said he fired Knight as soon as he could.
We do not tolerate that. That's disgusting. Make you sick to your stomach. That officer should never work in law enforcement again.
The video so offensive, they said, that the FOP, tasked with defending officers for wrongful termination, jumped on board, saying there is no excuse.
There's no appeal process going to be done on behalf of the FOP. We believe that decision was the right decision, and that should be the final decision.
Knight had worked for the jail since 2018. The video surfaced Tuesday, Collins said. Knight was fired within 2 days.
Was able to, work with the union to accelerate this and get that person out of a uniform as fast as possible.
Now, the one thing I did want to point out was that it is amazing to me that in Uvalde, the officers that follow police chief in Uvalde, Texas, still have their job. Caught on videotape, doing nothing. Meanwhile, in Louisville, a Department of Corrections officer was also masquerading as a cop in a video, turns around and says, Breonna Taylor, we killed that. And also said, do you want to be able to kill people and get away with it? Now, I commend the Louisville Police Correctional Facility, Louisville Department of Corrections. Keep in mind, I did not say Louisville PD. I said the Louisville Department of Corrections sat there and said, "Oh, we ain't playing this game. We ain't playing this game." Immediately fired him. Now, I understand this. The reason why I said there's a difference is because they realized that no, that doesn't represent us. Saw the evidence for what it was, saw the video, he was gone inside 2 days. Uvalde police officers who were in that school are still allowed to protect and serve, and they also have video of them also for what they did. Explain to me the difference, because all I see is one school district protecting their officers, and I had to see a Department of Corrections 6 states over literally do the right thing and get rid of the guy because he doesn't represent what they are. It is amazing how a Department of Corrections can act faster in firing an officer than a school district can of removing the officers along with their police chief. It is sad. It is sad. It is scary. And at the same time, I guarantee you that Department of Corrections officers send that video, there is probably some law enforcement and some delusional, misinformed individuals who will agree with what he's saying. And that is downright scary. But moving on to our last story, guys, before we get to our feel-good segment, I know I talked about student loans. I know we talked about Biden actually doing somewhat towards student loans. In his defense, I will always keep saying this, Biden in his defense, beside his student loan forgiveness plan, he did actually forgive the loans of those who were disabled, those who were in public service as far as teachers, first aid responders, things of that nature. He also did go down the list of colleges like ITT Tech and actually forgive the students of all their debt because of for-profit colleges that are preying upon them. Well, he actually did it again. Students that actually went to the Westwood College are getting their loans discharged. Said by the Education Department that the now defunct institution exploited students and abused the federal financial aid system. So 79,000 students who attended this college will now get their loans discharged. Now, as great as this is for those that went to Westwood College, it kind of reaffirms exactly what I've been saying, what they could have done. And what they could have done was simple. Biden could have done, because now it's becoming obvious that our $1.7 trillion and counting student loan debt could have been forgiven. Like I said, I'm not mad about the fact that yes, Westwood colleges, and also there is a settlement among colleges that is also being passed out that again you should be looking into. And of course, go to studentaid.gov to look into those programs and applications for borrower forgiveness once they become available. But at this point, it just goes to show you that yes, could have Biden done more? Yes, he could have. You know why? Both the wars now in Iraq and Afghanistan cost us nearly $7 trillion. That is more than double the amount that the total student loan debt right now is in America. If we could pay nearly $8 trillion for 2 wars in 2 different countries, we can surely pay off student loan debt for everyone. I mean, we could. But again, ITT Tech was one. Westwood College is another. I think that as the Education Department is starting to crack down these for-profit colleges, there may be more coming down the pipe. We shall see. But that being said, guys, we are going to move to our feel-good segment because usually how the Frack we got here, we do cover a lot of things that are doom and gloom, sometimes make you lose your faith in humanity. But hey, it is Wednesday, hump day. Tomorrow will be Friday Eve, Labor Day weekend for a few people. And with that being said, we do want to leave you guys with some feel-good vibrations of stories out there. And I believe this one out here, like I said, it goes back to just honestly being grateful and what a young man has done because of that.
Plus, meet the owner of a unique coffee shop in Pennsylvania.
What they are grateful for. Astoria Coffee in New York City was the first place the book showed up.
And it's so simple. It's just a few minutes every day.
Teddy Droseros, who for 10 years has written down what he is grateful for every day.
Thankful for the amazing dinner I had with my brother.
Put the book in the coffee shop with the permission of the owner.
So Astoria, you drop it off, and then do you keep going back to the coffee shop every day?
Yeah, I check up on it and write myself. And
what was it like seeing people sitting there writing in it?
That's always an awesome experience, like, because people would just take it and bring it to their seat and just read through it.
So explain to me what the gratitude journal was going to be.
I was just like, oh, this is just a tool that I can leave around everywhere to inspire people to practice gratitude.
It didn't take long before the book filled up, and so another one was left there.
I'm thankful for my pup, my health, friends, and fam. I'm grateful for living room, dance parties, and non-sexual intimacy.
I love it. I love it.
And at Bird Rock Coffee in San Diego, California, he put out more books after he moved there.
So then how many coffee shops did you end up giving books to around the country?
I actually don't know. My friends would help me out. You know, when they were traveling, they would get books out there. And then I started getting random emails from strangers saying, hey, I saw this in this coffee shop. Can we bring it to my neighborhood?
He calls his project Grateful Peoples. And a lot of that gratitude comes right back to him after the books are all filled up.
How many of them came back?
At least 100, I would say.
So when you got your first book back and you went through it, how was that?
I noticed that when I would feel down, I would go pick up one of the filled up books I collected. It would like instant make me feel better.
Teddy Droseros, by his own admission, was not always a grateful person, and thinks about that when he comes here, where he watched his mother's ashes flow into the Pacific Ocean.
What did she have?
She was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis when I was a baby, but eventually passed from cancer.
His mother's illness robbed him of a normal childhood, and it left him bitter, he says.
My experience with her and her sickness, you know, MS impacts the brain and changes behavior and personality, and it was difficult. It was kind of hard to be grateful for it at the time, and the thing with why I became so passionate about gratitude and started Grateful Peoples is because the more time I took to write in this journal, I realized that everything I was experiencing with my mom was seriously my biggest blessing I'll probably ever have.
Do you have your first entry?
Yeah. February 29th, 2012. I'm thankful I was born healthy into a great family with all limbs and able to do everything I was able to as a child. Playing all those sports growing up was a blessing.
If you need a fresh journal.
Now schools have teamed up with Grateful Peoples because Teddy Droseros has distributed 20,000 books to school children.
I'm grateful for my father.
I am grateful for how education changed how I spoke and how I wrote. I'm grateful for my little brother doing good in school.
It turns out that gratitude can foster more gratitude, and people actually want to read about it.
So you ended up writing a book, and the book was written with the entries of all kinds of people.
Yeah, it was just
Right.
like a collection of gratitude thoughts.
And what'd you call the book?
Today I'm grateful for.
And how many entries?
About 1,000.
Did you read every one of those in the book?
So I collected 75,000 entries and I read through every single one, which was a blessing because it was just like 75,000 bits of perspective.
Somewhere in those 75,000 entries was one that said Deanna, and today remains part of the legacy of Deanna Mondello, a dancer who died too young at 28 years old in a car crash.
When someone passes, you want to collect everything and every memory and everything that they touched and wrote.
Jen Freeman, a fellow dancer, was among the people who knew that a gratitude book at that Astoria coffee shop held a link to her friend Deanna.
So I went to the coffee shop and I asked who was responsible for these journals, and they put me in touch with Teddy.
Did Deanna seem to you to be a person of gratitude?
Yes, and that is what is really beautiful and sort of serendipitous about this whole connection coming together. Hearing about Deanna was sort of a catalyst for him to actually embark on this journey of creating this book. It makes so much sense to me because that was the way she lived her life. Like, she always was expressing her gratitude.
And Teddy's own mother, just before she died, wrote on July 11th, 2019.
She wrote, "I'm grateful to be alive." Just knowing where my mom was when she wrote that, the fact that she was able to just think and feel that way is special to me. And that's why I love this journal, and I'll have it with me forever. I got a piece of my mom here.
It's been 5 years since Teddy Droseros first left that gratitude book at that New York City coffee shop. He's still writing in them, a new one these days, and more often than not, about his mother.
The more you lose, the more I gain. As your illness took away the simple things, it made me realize how lucky I am to have them. I'm not sure I'd understand how lucky I am to tie my own shoes if I didn't have to tie yours when you couldn't do it anymore. But gratitude taught me it only makes sense to love something I can't change. It's the inspiration behind everything I do.
I just had a big aha moment. Gratitude taught me to love something I cannot change.
Yeah, that's what gratitude does. It allows you to shift your perspective of what already is. Like I can't change that my mom was sick, but I can look at it as a blessing, or I can look at it as something dark. But my relationship with her is the best it's ever been. It really is.
Even though she's long gone, it continues?
Yeah, oh, for sure. I'm more connected to her now than I ever was.
I mean, damn, that's deep. You don't get no deeper than that as far as gratitude goes. And the fact that he took something that has affected other people, especially being positive, and changed the way, your outlook on life and how you're looking at things. Even myself, I try to practice being grateful for a lot of things. Too many to list. But again, when you change the way you look at things, when you change your perception, you change your reality. At least that's my way about it. But anyway, that being said, guys, that's going to do it for this podcast. I do thank everybody that liked, that watched, that shared, that let people know this was live. I certainly appreciate it. Still want to know your opinions on everything that we talked about today. Still want to keep that conversation going. But before we do, guys, here's some shameless plugging. Let me talk about my buddy Vaughn, Big BZA Dot on all socials. They the Vaughn Westman on Facebook. Definitely check him out, as he is everywhere, especially with his TikToks and what is Big BZ thinking, because he's a definitely out of the box cat, but I love him. But still, check him out. Big Busy A on all socials. Edwin Westman on Facebook. Of course, yours truly, guys, on every social you can find me on, BlackFox447. You can definitely follow me there. I usually post everything that I watch and play, and also some gym stuff, because I still do a couple push-ups. Same time, guys, I'm all about positivity, encouraging people to be forward, because we do need to change the way we approach each other, especially brothers. Don't be afraid to say hi if you see the brother in person. We are always, so walled up. We are so defensive, and I'm like, everybody is going through something, and nobody is whole, nobody is perfect. Everybody is going through something. But if you just check on them, say hi, say hello, see how they're doing, it's a lot more than just showing that you care. You could actually be saving a life in the process. It takes zero energy to be nice. It takes everything in you to be a dick. So don't be a dick. That's simple. Also, guys, if you're going to high traffic areas, please wear a mask, because monkeypox, COVID, and its Decepticons are still out there. There are still cases, even though we don't talk about it as much as we used to, but still, when you protect yourself, you protect others. So definitely try to do that. The last thing I'll say about the Frack we got here, guys, is all about staying informed. We are not trying to reinvent the wheel. We are simply trying to give you all the information, allow you to make up your own mind, provide, not prescribe, but provide a logical explanation to go along with it. Because when we don't learn from history, I should say, well, that was a terrible spill. Oh, that was funny. Because basically when we're informed, we're progressive, we move forward, we try to right the wrongs of our past by making decisions now that we should have done back then, like electing our first black woman to Supreme Court Justice, electing our first black woman to the Federal Board of Governors, electing our first black 4-star military general. When we don't learn from history, we are doomed to repeat it. That's why we keep asking ourselves, why does everything change? Why does everything go up on our paycheck? Why are we electing different politicians, but still the same old game in Congress? And most importantly, how the Frack we got here. Thank you all for watching, guys. Again, the link's at the bottom. Copy and paste that in your browser. It'll take you to all of my link trees. Like, share, and subscribe. Take care of yourselves and each other, and we will all get through this. Peace.